Hello, everyone. My name is Valerie Yakel, and I'm an investigator here on campus in the Office of Equal Opportunity and Regulatory Compliance. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about Title IX and sexual misconduct and other interpersonal violence. So let's get started. So first of all, what is Title IX? So Title IX is a federal law that prohibits discrimination based on sex in educational programs and activities. So prohibited conduct under Title IX is going to cover things like sexual assault, sexual harassment, and other forms of non-consensual sexual contact. And I put here because I think it's important to note that Title IX protects both males and females. I think a lot of people think that Title IX is something that really protects women, or that it's something that is generally just applied to women, but that is not the case at all, and it does equally apply to and protect both men and women. So the University of Mississippi policy. So we have a Title IX coordinator. Her name is Honey Ursery, and she serves as the primary contact for conducting investigations into sex discrimination and sexual misconduct complaints. And most faculty and staff members must report to the Title IX coordinator when they hear about a potential Title IX violation or any sexual misconduct or other interpersonal violence that happens on or off campus. And it's important to note as well that safety measures are available even if a person does not want to make a formal complaint. So you can still come to the Title IX office or the Equal Opportunity and Regulatory Compliance office and get supportive measures and other types of accommodations without the need to go into a formal investigation and to make a formal complaint. But I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. So what is prohibited at the University of Mississippi? So as you can see, our policy prohibits sexual harassment, sexual assault, stalking, dating, and domestic violence. And we also prohibit retaliation, and that is something I'll talk to you later as well about. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about each one of these before we talk about retaliation. So sexual harassment. So sexual harassment means either an employee of the university conditioning the provision of an aid, benefit, or service of the university on an individual's participation in unwelcome sexual conduct, or unwelcome sexual conduct determined by a reasonable person to be so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to an educational program or activity of the university. So I highlighted there, as you can see, severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. When we're talking about sexual harassment, we generally are looking for those types of things. So sexual assault. So sexual assault is going to include rape, sodomy, sexual assault with an object, and fondling. And it's important to note with sexual assault that all of those types of violations, they're going to occur without the consent of the victim. And that really is the main piece we're looking for with sexual assault. So because with a sexual assault, as you can see, like I said, it occurs without the consent of the victim, it is important to talk about what effective consent looks like here on campus and under our policy. So effective consent under our policy is an affirmative agreement through clear actions or words to engage in sexual activity, and the person giving the consent must act freely, voluntarily, and with an understanding of his or her actions when giving that consent. So a person who is incapacitated, which means they're unconscious, unaware, or otherwise physically helpless, that person cannot give effective consent to sexual activity. So someone who is incapacitated, when he or she engages in sexual activity and cannot understand who or appreciate who, what, where, why, or how with respect to that sexual interaction. So alcohol and drugs, as you might imagine, was going to play a very important role in this. So for example, someone could be under the influence of alcohol or drugs or something else like that, and they might verbally say yes or something like that, or give some kind of indication that they might want to have sex or partake in some kind of sexual activity. But if that person is incapacitated, that means that regardless of what they're maybe saying in that moment, they are unable to give effective consent to that sexual activity because they're incapacitated, whether it's because of alcohol or drugs or maybe some other substance. So it is important to note that even some of your actions or someone's actions when they are incapacitated, that still may not be effective consent just because they're incapacitated. So I do want to point that out. Dating violence means violence committed by a person who is or has been in a social relationship of a romantic or intimate nature with the victim. Similar to that, we have domestic violence, and domestic violence includes crimes of violence committed by a current or former spouse or intimate partner of the victim by a person with whom the victim has had a domestic relationship. Stalking. So stalking is a course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for his or her safety or the safety of others, or suffer substantial emotional distress. Some things we hear when people talk about stalking, we hear the term creepy a lot. Sometimes people don't associate certain behaviors or conduct with stalking. Sometimes that term could be a little jarring for people. So normally what we do here is creepy. So again, that's something to keep in mind if, you know, you're just going around campus and someone might be like following you to class repeatedly, or someone may, again, be giving you those creepy vibes. That's something you want to be mindful of. You know, does that conduct arise to the level of stalking? So pregnant students, they are entitled to accommodations related to their pregnancy for educational activities, and accommodations can be provided even if a student has a miscarriage or an abortion as related to that pregnancy. Amnesty is another important provision of our policy that I want to talk about. So students will not be in trouble under the drug and alcohol policy for voluntary personal use of alcohol or drugs. So this amnesty is going to apply to all parties, including potential witnesses to an investigation. A person may be required to undergo alcohol or drug education. That's going to be in the very rarest of circumstances where we talk to a person multiple times in a short period of time, and every time we speak to them, we hear about them, you know, partaking in alcohol or drugs or other things like that. If, you know, if we start to think that some kind of alcohol or drug, you know, recreational activity, if we start to feel that that may actually be a hindrance on someone, there might be some substance abuse issues there, we might require them to undergo alcohol or drug education. But again, that's nothing punitive. That is just really an educational moment for that student, whoever that person is. An amnesty is intended to encourage students to come forward for reporting and responding to an incident of sexual misconduct of relationship violence. We really don't want people to not come and talk to us about an incident, whether they're a party or a witness or anything like that. We want people to feel comfortable coming to speak to us, regardless of whether someone may have been partaking in, again, voluntary use of alcohol or drugs. So if you come to our office and tell us that, you know, you were at a party when an alleged incident occurred, and you or maybe some of the other people there were smoking marijuana or doing anything like that, if that's voluntary use, we're really not trying to get anyone in trouble for that. We really do just want people coming forward and feeling comfortable doing so when it does come to talking about, you know, different incidents and things that we're investigating. So very important to remember our amnesty policy. Retaliation, another important provision in our Title IX policy. So the university prohibits retaliation due to reporting a conduct violation, participating or cooperating in an investigation, or pursuing legal action. And the university defines retaliation as any adverse action, including intimidation, taken against an individual who has participated in any manner in investigation, proceeding, or hearing under the policies and procedures of the university. And this, like amnesty, is going to apply to all parties, including potential witnesses. So violation of the policy. So what happens when that occurs? So the person who has allegedly experienced that violation, they're normally going to be able to decide what he or she would like to do next. The potential complainant has no choice if there's an ongoing threat to the university community. So if we learn of something and maybe there's an incident where a gun was involved, a sexual assault with a gun or something like that, something that would make the Title IX office of the university feel that the entire community could be at risk. If that is the case, then that person may or may not have a choice about whether or not the university is going to investigate an allegation, but that is a very rare circumstance. So ordinarily, that person who experienced that policy violation, they're going to be able to decide whether or not they want to move forward with an investigation. And if there is an investigation, the investigator, that is me, or Davis Crow is the other investigator here, will attempt to talk to all parties and witnesses, and hearings are held on campus and they take place within a reasonable amount of time. So sanctions resulting from the hearing, if any, will vary depending on the circumstances of each case. Student disclosures. So you may or may not know, there were new Title IX regulations that were just passed by the Department of Education over the summer. So I know there's been a lot of talk about maybe not understanding what geographic locations are covered or protected under Title IX. Per University of Mississippi policy, the geographic location really does not matter when it comes to sexual misconduct or sexual harassment or other types of, you know, sexual or intimate partner violence that we're discussing. So we have our Title IX policy and our interpersonal violence and sexual misconduct policy. So those two policies, they are separate, but they do work together to cover incidents that occur both on and on campus, and to cover incidents that occur regardless of whether that incident took place in the educational program or activity of the university. So I just want to put that in there because I know some people were a little bit confused hearing about these new Title IX regulations about exactly what is covered. So I do just want to point out that, again, with our Title IX policy and with our interpersonal violence and sexual misconduct policy, geographic location of an incident does not matter. And again, the university program or activity, that doesn't matter as well, because between those two policies, we do cover a very, very wide range of conduct. So accommodations and other resources available for students. Accommodations may be offered to both complainants and respondents for a Title IX or other interpersonal violence and sexual misconduct violation. To get accommodations, the student does not have to go through a formal investigation. So a student does not have to make a formal complaint or do a formal investigation to receive different accommodations. And I'll talk about those different accommodations in a second. So you can come to our office and just request accommodations or supportive measures without the need to go through that formal investigation or the formal complaint. And accommodations are offered through the Title IX office as well as the Violence Intervention and Prevention Services. That would be for complainants, and the UMatter office for respondents. So what do those accommodations look like? So any of those offices, again, the Title IX office, the Violence Prevention and Intervention Services, and the UMatter office, all three of those offices are going to be able to offer academic accommodations. That could be a change of a class, a schedule change, something like that, housing accommodations, no contact directives and safety accommodations. A no contact directive is basically just a directive in the form of a letter between the two parties from the university, and it basically just says to not contact one another and to cut off communication with each other. Non-punitive. We have found that that's been very useful in a lot of situations. Student conduct and criminal justice assistance, we can also offer help with those things, and we can also give referrals to the counseling center and to student health. So other policies to be aware of, I do want to point out the consensual relationship policy. So if you're in a position of authority, then you may not have an intimate relationship with one of your staff members or students. And if such a relationship develops, you must let your supervisor know so he or she can remove you. And if you know someone that is involved in a relationship of this nature, you should definitely let your supervisor know. And if you are the supervisor, then definitely you want to give Honey Ursery a call. She is the Assistant Director of Equal Opportunity and Regulatory Compliance and the Title IX Coordinator, and she can discuss different ways to kind of remedy that situation. So more resources for students. So generally all resources are free aside from potential hospital costs. Violence intervention and prevention services, again, that is complainant services, and the UMatter office, that's where our respondent services are housed. Title IX, that is where I work. We do accommodations and investigations. We also, of course, have the University Police Department, the Oxford Police Department, different health services like Student Health, Baptist Memorial Hospital, and the University Counseling Center. And there's also Family Crisis Services that is off campus, and they provide advocacy and counseling. So please feel free to contact the Title IX office at any time. Again, Honey Ursery, like I said, is the Assistant Director of EORC and the Title IX Coordinator. My name is Valerie Yakel, and I'm an investigator here in the Title IX office. And Davis Crow is the other investigator we have working with us. There's our contact information, phone number, location on campus, email address. So if you have any questions, please give us a call, give us an email, anything like that. And thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.